While they're kicking things off here this week, we seem to be really in the heart of winter with just this massive cold blast that reached anywhere from what we're used to in the Midwest, a little bit colder than what we're used to actually, then stretching all the way down to southern areas, down to Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, bringing some pretty cold Arctic air, quite a bit of snow for some areas that aren't really used to it either, too. A lot of ag and non-agricultural impacts. So just kind of kicking things off for this week, what are you looking at in terms of the impact that we're going to see for a lot of these areas?
Yeah, I mean, take a look at this satellite image from when the sun finally rose this morning. We've cleared out enough that you can see the snow, right? And I start to notice a couple things. Like there's a little wedge in through here where we don't have any snow, but we've now taken it all the way down south. Huge swath of snow moved through the middle part of the country, and it's still finishing up in the Northeast as you and I are talking. But look at a little before and after here. This was on the 22nd where the snowpack was, and this is now today. So much, much greater coverage here. And if you think about it, there's quite a bit of liquid in this snow. But I do want to stress that the liquid that is in the snow here, okay, and then of course up north, we're probably not going to get to keep any of this because the preceding Arctic air that came in through this area froze the topsoil. So this melts, it's just going to run off or it's going to sublimate. It's going to get back into the atmosphere. I'm not anticipating this being a big boom to soil moisture. It was just too cold before the thing came through. But you have to take note of this area. When we think about our drought situation, I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's broad areas of the country here that continues to be very dry. Nebraska is one huge source of that. In fact, I was looking this morning at the North Platte and the South Platte. These are in the snowpack on those rivers, and they are at near historic lows. So this is a concern how dry it's been here. And in the Colorado Basin, it is the lowest snowpack up to this point in the year for the last 10 years. So while we're doing okay in California, which we know is drought free, the Northwest through the Rockies out here into these major river systems need more moisture out of this. But here's the official totals. Let's just have a look at it. That's your last 72 hours of total accumulated snow. And starting in Albuquerque and finishing way up here in Maine, I mean, we just ripped a system across the country. And where I am, Dawson, I know you didn't pick up any on this, but we had around where I live 6 to 8 inches of snow. Indy got hit pretty hard, and south of there did as well. So did Southern Illinois. This was a monster system, and I'm supposed to head over tonight to Columbus. I hope I can make it over here, just given how terrible it is. Now to the south of it, a lot of this was ice, and you can actually see still this morning what states are still showing ice, power outages, a lot of this from ice. I'd have to say that probably Tennessee was hardest hit because of this corridor here and how populated it is with Nashville in the middle of it. I was talking to a good friend of mine this morning in Nashville, and he says they don't expect to have power back on for him for another week. So he may be out of power during this Arctic outbreak. Now, I do want to show you there was some good moisture out of this. If we just kind of look to the south, we saw storms across the south, rain that hit the delta. I mean, some of these totals are pretty good. But, up where we're talking about the heavier snows like in Indy, there's only 7/10 of an inch of liquid in that, and they're not going to get to keep much of this at all. And a lot of that has to do with the temperatures. That's what you see most of the color on this map showing here midday on Monday. This is all temperature related. Either got cold weather advisories, we've got extreme cold warnings, extreme cold watches. We're expecting freezing temperatures to get deep into Florida as well. And that's what we're going to be dealing with. There's a lot of cold air. Interestingly enough, last Thursday, the Great Lakes were only 18% covered in ice. Now they're 43% covered in ice. I made a little personal bet with myself that I think that by this time next week, they'll be at 65% covered with ice because we've got a lot of Arctic air coming through. I mean, this is just right now. We finally got up above 0 in Champaign. We're up at 1, you're near 10. And still throughout much of the upper Midwest and northern woods of Minnesota, Wisconsin, we're still in the negative single digits. By the way, over the weekend, we hit minus 51 as a wind chill in parts of Wisconsin. So very, very cold. My friends up there were joking about how they hope that killed off the mosquitoes. I doubt it. I'm sure they're going to come back next year. All right, here's the pattern. Big ridge west, deep trough east that opens up into the Atlantic. And what's interesting about that is the eastern half of the U.S., much of Scandinavia, we'll talk Eastern Europe, and almost all of Russia, very cold over the next 10 days. And this is part of the reason why we've seen this bounce in the natural gas markets. This started to show up in the forecast late last week. But it's being driven by the fact that our polar vortex is massively disrupted and it is sticking right down here between the Hudson Bay and the Great Lakes. And if you have that co-located and on top of a surface trough or a low level trough, we're just talking about some pretty chilly air. If I had to go dig up one analog, I'd tell you this looks a lot like 14. As we got into February 14, look, polar vortex was split just like it is right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of the flavor of 2014 going forward because we do not expect the polar vortex to regain its strength anytime soon. See how below average it is? So what that brings me to is this. What happened late January into February into 14? We tended to have access to, not constant, but access to cold air across the eastern half of the United States. So mild, dry, stagnant west, more active in terms of Arctic air east. 2014 seems to be the most logical analog, most recent analog to what we're dealing with right now. Now, remember, for the rest of winter, add in 18, 2018, and 2009 with 2014 to kind of give a good picture where we're expecting to go. But look at these temperatures. This morning, single digits into Texas. They're expecting that again. Memphis at -1 tomorrow. The cold air slides toward the south and east throughout Thursday into Friday and Saturday. And what will be really interesting as we go from Saturday into Sunday is with all this cold air in place, we're worried about a big nor'easter going up the coast while the rest of the country is relatively dry. But here's what it looks like, man. Over the next 5 days, that's the average temperature anomaly. There's a lot of minus, 10, 20, 30 degrees cooler than normal. And as I played in a 5 day sliding window, we're out here 10 days from now. We're still colder than average in the West, while there seems to be in the models a bit of a warm up coming out of the Canadian prairie into the plains. And interestingly enough, these kind of warm-ups from the west happened in 2014, 2018, 2009, while we just stayed cooler on off to the west. It also shows up in the ensembles. If you just look here at the day 5 through 10 forecast and then day 10 through 15, you can start to see why we're getting more of that western warm-up, Canadian prairie warm-up cold east with time. It's all about the size of this large ridge that's living off the west right now. Okay, last couple things about temperature before I give you a bit on precip. I made mention of 14 being an analog. Now watch this. If I go through the next week fully into week 2, so that's day 8 through 15. See the warm up happening here? Watch what happens as I go to week 3 and then week 4. You see, we tend to open this channel of Arctic air back up, and both the GFS extended and the European model extended show that for much of February. Now, with cold air comes dryness, and there's a trough here and a trough there and a large ridge over the west. So the net effect of that is a lot of the country is going to be seeing drier conditions, with the exception of clippers coming through in this potential nor'easter event that's setting up this weekend. I'd like to show you that real quick, Dawson. Here's early this morning. Okay, let's play that out. Lake effect snow going forward. 1 weak front hits the west, but it's not much to talk about. This is now Thursday into Friday. Now watch. Going into Saturday morning, keep an eye on the Carolinas right here. That's Saturday morning, Saturday midday, getting into Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon and evening. And that is, look at this if I play it back here. Look at the size of this system coming through this weekend. This would be a huge, huge system to run up the East Coast. And some of the forecast models are laying down, absolutely epic amounts of snow. If we let this load here, just kind of zoom in a bit more on the east. Total forecast snowfall. Look at that. Look at this coming through. So Dawson, I don't know if you have anywhere to travel, but if we shut down Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore, Boston, and all of New York City's airports, this is a big deal this upcoming weekend. So we got to pay attention to it. All right. Now, with that being said, right now, the European model kicks off that big snowstorm Saturday, Sunday. The GFS says no. But remember, the GFS also said that this snowpack coming through here, let me see if I can go back and find this. Let's go here. The GFS only had snow this past weekend, the one we just finished, right in through there, had none of this and none of that. So right now, this GFS model's not been exactly firing on all cylinders. Bigger picture is I've got ensemble support for that low, which means we're seeing all of the weather forecast models. When we run them many, many times over and over, we tend to look for where they agree and where they disagree. It seems to be in there. But if you want more snow, this is through the next 300 hours. It's only here or coming off the Great Lakes. The rest of us are just caught in Arctic air, but no really, really good snowfall coming out of this. You see, there's that pattern. Got it? So that is why when we look out there, even into week 2, we're drier. So that's kind of the main story going forward. And where I think it's important, Dawson, to look at is this. Since the start of the new year, we've got areas here that are very dry. We've got areas in the Northwest that are very dry. And in fact, I didn't bring this up, but let's go look at it. Let's go look at the latest soil moisture data just to prove a point here. Look at the soil moisture values underneath all that snow. They're so low, and we're not going to be putting liquid into the soil because it's frozen right now. So, Dawson, that's my short-term story for you.
Yeah, I mean, so it just seems like we're going to be going back to the idea of if we have this level of persistence here for the near term, that we're really banking on going further out in order to get some better chances of replenishing a lot of that soil moisture come spring.
I mean, here's what I want, okay? Oops, sorry, I gotta type that in clear. Current ocean temperatures. There you go. Look at that. La Nina's dying. I mean, that's
Mhm.
good. We want that if we want to change this up, but we're talking about changing it up by spring. And my concern, Dawson, is that as we get into spring, I'll just draw on this map, we're gonna have to watch the plains for the risk of being drier. We tend to produce more of our severe weather in springs where we develop an El Nino from the delta east, and it tends to be less frequent in the plains. Now, that's tilting the odds. It doesn't mean it's going to be that way exactly. But if it does, I just think there's more of a story taking shape here with where we could have some spring troubles if this continues to fade. So I'll tell you, watch this now. And then once we get into May and June, all of our focus comes up here again, right? We're just going to go back to the Gulf of Alaska, get into summer. That's going to be our target area. So that's kind of my advice going forward here with this because the next 30 days, we are drier. We're drier in the West. And I want to know by the time we get into the month of March, which this goes out to March, are we looking at storms here and here, or are they going to actually come back to the plains? That will be the trickiest part of figuring out this early growing season for next year.
Keep the focus back on the short range again, moving down to South America. What are you seeing with the latest down there as, harvesting for soybeans continues to progress in Brazil. The planting of the safrinha corn crop continues to progress. What are they seeing down there?
Yeah, I only have access to what they do in Mato Grosso. I don't know where to go to find the other things, but I do know that right now they're nearly 14% harvested on soybeans, right? A year ago they were below the 5-year average, which is about 5.5%. So they're really moving along this year with harvest. If we look out over the next few weeks from Minas Gerais over toward Goiás, clipping part of Mato Grosso do Sul, and then back down maybe into Sao Paulo and Paraná, it looks wetter. If Mato Grosso shows up near normal to drier than normal, they're going to really get through harvest fast and get planting going, I think, pretty quickly here. I think there's more of a story with what's happening down here. And the reason I say that is if I pull this up real quick, let's go to my website. Let's go look at, there we go. And look at this. We've seen for the last month major precipitation deficits. This is Buenos Aires, that's Cordoba, this is Santa Fe. I mean, these are really important areas that are missing out on precipitation. If we come back to that map, that's right where we have it dry for the next couple of weeks. And even some of the longer term forecasts for all of February are drier there. So here's what I want you to think about. I don't know if this is a story yet. I don't know if the markets care, but we could see a pullback in expected productivity out of Argentina. And then I do wonder if it is in fact this much wetter than average. That's an extra 4 to 5 inches of rainfall in this area through the month of February. Is that enough to kind of slow them down? I don't know, Dawson, because right now they're on a tear off, pace, just blasting through a harvest of that first crop of soybeans. Now, again, that's Mato Grosso. Mato Grosso is not, if it was Mato Grosso do Sul over towards Sao Paulo, then I have something to talk about. But that's my latest I think I know about South America.
Yeah, I mean, Brazil as a whole is still looking at those two paces ahead of last year. So, I mean, Brazil as a whole really hasn't been impacted too much by current rain either. So, I mean, yeah, that kind of seems to be showing up right there.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the latest NDVI data. Sometimes, oh, there it goes. So if we come in here and look at this, let's mask this for crops and only choose Brazil, just all of Brazil. We are now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of new record high NDVI in Brazil. So when I look at that, I'm like, okay, anything I think I see in terms of a problem, I'm not sure it's there. But by the way, let's take Brazil off and put Argentina on. Argentina was above average, but since lately it's come back toward average. Maybe that's just an indication that the crop's not just taken off and looking amazing from space. So a couple of pieces of information there to add to the story, but I think we need compounding evidence that there's a problem before the markets are going to care.
Yeah, going to continue to watch those as we move forward, especially as, developments here in the US too, with a lot of this Arctic air, seeing how that's impacting things here, moving throughout the winter and kind of lining up for that spring season again here. But we're going to end it right there and always appreciate your insights, Eric, and we'll talk next time.
All right, thanks, Dawson.